In this video, I want to give my 5 top tips that you can quickly apply to make sure that you have a good workstation setup to help to maintain a good posture. So stay tuned. Thanks for checking out the channel. My name's John. I'm the head therapist here at John W Sports Injury. If you are new to our channel, we want to be doing 3 simple things. We want to help you understand your body so you can get rid of any pain or weakness and to go on and achieve the sport, exercise and well-being goals that you want to be achieving. So recently I saw a headline flash up on my news where physiotherapists have published that they feel that one of the biggest contributors to people's pain is their workstation posture. And as we've made a transition towards hybrid or home working, we're seeing more effect. I think that those things are only going to be increasing. So what I wanted to do is talk through 5 simple tips that you can take and apply to your workstation, whether you're working at the office or at home, and you can check these things directly to make sure that you're maintaining as good a posture as possible in order to prevent any future degeneration, pain or problems. So tip number 1 is that you want to make sure that underneath your workstation you've got plenty of space. I commonly see people at their workstation with things cluttered underneath, and what we tend to do, human nature, is we compromise our posture, perhaps by moving our legs to the side and then twisting in order to achieve the goals. But if we simply clear out the underneath of our workstation to allow for our feet to be and legs to be in a comfortable position, that is going to allow us a better posture from the start. So tip number 1 is to make sure that the underneath of your workstation is clutter free so that you can keep your legs in a nice comfortable position. Tip number 2, and the first thing that you want to be thinking about really once that is done, is to get the correct chair height. I often see people compromise their chair height in order to get to the appropriate screen height, but we're going to get to that later. The first thing you want to do is make sure that your chair is at the optimal height. Now, what is the optimal height? Well, we want to make sure that our hip joint sits above our knee joint. So you can see here that my legs are angled downwards. If I have that chair in a lower position, what then happens is that the leg flattens out. We want to get ourselves to a point where the hip joint can sit above the knee joint. Why is this happening? Well, that allows me to keep that lumbar curve and that better posture. So we want to make sure that the hip joint is above the knee joint. The next thing we want to make sure is that we're at a comfortable position for our desk height. So what we're looking to do here is to place our hands into our lap. With your hands in your lap, that's your relaxed shoulder position. Now, when I then come up onto my keyboard or onto the desktop, that shoulder shouldn't change. So if I'm sitting lower, you might find that you reach a little bit at the shoulder. Now, again, you might not think that to be a problem, but actually if I said to somebody, we want you to hold your shoulders in this position for 7, 8, 9 hours, you wouldn't do that because you would naturally think that that is going to make you tight at the shoulder. But when we're sat at a workstation, people don't think of it like that. But making these important cues at this stage can really help to keep things relaxed. So we want to have the hip joint above the knee joint, and we want to have our shoulders nice and relaxed with our hands on the desktop. Roughly speaking, our hands in line with our elbows. Now, if you find that you've done these tips and you can't get your feet flat on the floor, not a problem. Don't drop that chair height to get your feet on the floor. Instead, bring something in like a footrest or a stack of books that allows you to keep your feet in contact with a flat surface. So tip number 1 was to keep the area cluttered free underneath your desk. Tip number 2 was to get the chair height in the optimal position. Tip number 3 is we then want to set our screen heights. So once we've got the chair in the optimal position, what we then want to think about with our head in a neutral position, so not flexed, not extended, we want to imagine a horizontal beam of light coming out of our eyes. Now, roughly speaking, that should be hitting the top third of your screen. So for me here, I come straight out and I hit just below the top of my screen. If you're somebody who's a particularly confident typist, you might be able to bring that screen a little bit higher so that the eye line's coming into here. But if you're like me and you refer down to your keyboard quite a lot as you type, then I would say somewhere around the top of the screen or just below the top of the screen is optimal. Now, you might be with somebody who, like me, who works with more than one screen. If that is the case, what I often see is people's second screens are perhaps a laptop flat on the workstation. So we have this situation going on where we might be looking straight ahead and then looking down at a second screen. That's something we don't want to do. So if you can elevate your second screen, you can see mine's elevated here using something like a laptop stand, which can be a very cost-effective bit of equipment to help with your workstation. But failing that, you can do this by placing that onto a box some books and things like that. Just make sure if you are doing that there's nothing flammable because of the heat of the laptop and things. But try to work your second screen to be as close in height as possible to the first screen. So tip number 4 as we move on is then to think about how we're laying out things on our workstation. And this is where I talk about what I call my primary zone. I want everything that I might need to be easily reachable and allow me not to compromise my posture. So if I've got myself to the point where I've got the optimal chair position, the optimal screen position, I now want to make sure that my keyboard and mouse are operational without me having to compromise that posture at all. So we want to make sure that they're close. One of the common things that I might see is things like keyboards being pushed away to allow for paper and things. Now, that's fine to then be if we're doing a lot of writing and things, but what I then see is people stretching over the top of the keyboards. Why is this a problem? Well, really that's threefold. Firstly, I've not got a lot of flexion at my spine as I get into this keyboard position. So that causes me a problem at the lower back. My shoulders are stretched here. You can see that I'll be placing extra tension through my shoulders as I stretch for the keyboard. The other thing that happens is we have this strange postural adaptation happen at the neck where we've got a flexed spine but extended here cervical or neck spine to try and look at the screen. And all of these things can be easily rectified by just swapping my paper position with that keyboard, and then I can go back into keeping all of those things in neutral. So make sure that your keyboard and mouse, when being operated, are in that close position. Anything else that you may need, I often use a headset. That is in easy reach for me so that I know I can be maintaining this posture throughout the working day. And again, if we are using paper, that's fine, but just make sure you're swapping between the two so that you're not compromising yourselves when you're using that paper. And then my 5th and final tip, and perhaps the most important in all of this, you've heard me speak throughout this video about getting the optimal posture. Well, really, I use a cheesy phrase, but it's quite applicable here when I say that the best posture is the next posture. Now, what do I mean by that? Yes, we can set ourselves into all these good ergonomic positions so that things are set for ourselves so that we can leave the muscles relatively relaxed. We can leave them not in a shortened state or a lengthened state. But we do know that muscles are designed to be contracting and relaxing. We're designed to be moving around and not static for too long. So what you want to be doing is making sure that you're factoring in as much movement into your working day as possible. So it might be if you're having virtual meetings and things, that you can do those meetings whilst walking around in the office. Or if you're taking phone calls, these are things that you can typically do whilst walking around and enjoying the benefits that come from movement throughout the working day, not just from a postural perspective, but also from a productivity perspective as well. So make sure that we're not, what I don't want you to take from this video is that this is the posture that we adopt at our workstation and then we keep that for 7, 8, 9 hours. This is a good posture, or the best posture potentially that we can have whilst being seated at our workstation. But please don't substitute that for movement. We want to be making sure that we're moving as much as possible throughout the working day. I hope that's been helpful. Now, there's lots of other bits that we can discuss around ergonomics in more detail, but what I wanted this to do is 5 simple tips that you can apply to your workstation. So if this has been helpful for you, you can do me a favor and hit that like button so other people can adopt these tips. And if you've got any other thoughts or disagreements, please do drop me a comment below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, why not subscribe, and then I'll be keeping you updated on the next video that comes live on this channel. I look forward to seeing you there.